task switching versus multitasking. What exactly do those terms even mean? And are they really that bad for your productivity as everyone says? What's up? My name is Caroline of Habitsinprogress.com, and in this video I'm not only going to show you the differences or similarities of task switching and multitasking, but I'll also share a few tips with you that will help you be much more productive every single day. Now, before we get started, one thing I do want to mention is I have a free Pomodoro worksheet that I'll link down below, and this is one of the tips that I'll share with you later to be more productive. But if you want to be well prepared, make sure to download it now and then you're ready to dive in. Okay, so let's first look at task switching versus multitasking. Now, I'm sure you've all heard how bad multitasking is for your productivity. But what about task switching, or context switching, how it's also often called? What does it even mean? Task switching is often referred to as rapidly switching between two different tasks. Now, research has shown that this significantly slows our work efficiency. With every switch, we have to slow down, and we actually have to use extensive high-level cognitive processing to shift from one task to the next. So with every shift or with every switch, we use a lot of steam. We need a lot of cognitive processing, a lot of mental energy that is pretty much wasted, because you need this energy to switch and not to actually do the task. As a result, the more you switch, the slower you'll be done with either of the tasks. Multitasking, on the other hand, is generally defined as performing several tasks at the same time. So in contrast to task switching, you're not necessarily switching from one task to the next, but you're performing them simultaneously. However, if we're looking at the classic examples of multitasking, for instance, you're scrolling through your phone while you're trying to write an article, or you're trying to read a book while having dinner, then it's actually pretty much the same as task switching, because it's virtually impossible to write and scroll through your phone at the same time. You need your hands for both of those activities, so you always have to stop, scroll a bit, then you put your phone away, and then you write again. So this is actually exactly the same as task switching, and it's similar for if you're doing two things where you need the same senses. So for instance, if we're looking at reading a book and eating dinner, then you always have to, like, you can read, and then when you have to take a bite, when you want to take a bite, then you have to shift your focus, because otherwise your fork is gonna go in, like your food is gonna end up in your lap. So you always have to switch between the two. So if we're talking about those classic kind of like bad multitasking, then it's actually the same as task switching. So if we're comparing the two, they're actually equally bad for your productivity, because in both cases you usually have to switch from one thing to the next, and that is can be really draining for your brain, because you need all that energy just to make those switches, whereas you could use the same energy to actually get work done. However, there is one kind of multitasking, in my opinion, that can be beneficial for your productivity, or it can at least make boring things or like leisure activities even more fun. However, this should only be applied during your break hours or your leisure time, and this is not to get more work done, but simply to enhance a physical activity with a mental activity. We'll get to that later again in this video when I'll share the tips with you that will help you be more productive. So if task switching and multitasking are bad, what should you do instead? Monotasking. Really simple, right? And it's exactly what it sounds like. It just means that you're only working on one kind of task at a time. Alright, so now let's look at a few things that you can adjust in your daily schedule to be more productive. Number one, work in blocks. So this is where monotasking works best. And that is if you add blocks in your day, and you have certain blocks where you'll be working in a focused manner, and then you have break blocks. And the best way to implement that is to use calendar blocking. So that simply means that you add those blocks into your calendar. So you know exactly, you can look at your calendar and you know exactly what's going on during your day. Now, in order to do that, first figure out when are your productive times. So usually it depends on if you're a morning person or an evening person, but usually the most productive times will probably be in the early morning after you get up, and then maybe again in the later afternoon, or maybe you have like 4 or 5 blocks and in between you need breaks. So test that out for about a week and see and really observe yourself and see when are the times that you're absolutely thriving and you're super focused, and when are the more low energy times. Then you take those low energy times and these will be your breaks. So schedule break blocks in there, and this is where you're going to do other things, leisure things, go outside and just do something to refresh your brain so that you can again be focused during a focus block. Number 2, batch your work. Now, to add to the first point of working in blocks, batching is the perfect add-on to that. Batching simply means to take a bunch of similar tasks together and then only working on those during a set amount of time. So the great advantage with working in blocks and batching is that you have to make very few switches. So ideally, you would take like very similar or the same tasks together. For instance, let's say you're a blogger and you publish multiple blog posts per week. Ideally, you would take all of the writing process together. So you would, for instance, during one day, write 3 blog posts and only do the writing. You're not going to edit it, you're not going to prepare it or anything, you only do the writing process, and then during the next day, you're only going to edit all of those and then schedule them. If you manage to do that, you'll have very few switches. So ideally, you only have switches like from a work block to a break block. So let's say you have 4 work blocks and then like 3 leisure blocks in between. Then you only have about 8 switches that you have to make. Of course, you'll have some smaller switches, but it's not like from one like totally unrelated task to the next, and you'll be much more efficient and productive. Now, bear in mind that will take some time. This won't happen overnight. It needs some practice to see how much you can really do in one day and how much energy you have to stay in that same mental zone. That will take some practice. Maybe just start with 1 article during a morning, only do the writing and then do the editing in the afternoon, and then just keep going from there and improve it as much as possible. Number 3, use the Pomodoro technique. So this is what I've mentioned before, and this is where the free worksheet will come in handy. It's linked down below, so make sure you get that now. It simply means that you'll work in uninterrupted chunks of 25 minutes at a time, and then you take a 5-minute break. What's great about that is that 25 minutes is not super overwhelming. It's a really short amount of time, but if you manage to be really focused and to avoid all the multitasking and task switching, so you're only monotasking on one thing during 25 minutes, you'll be amazed at how much you can done in that time. Before I started using it, I couldn't believe that you could actually be productive in 25 minutes because it sounds like it's nothing, right? But try it out for yourself. Set a timer, so there are tons of Pomodoro timer apps, just Google it, and then put your phone away and only work on one task for 25 minutes. After that, you can take a 5-minute break where you get up, do something else. Try not to look at your phone for at least 2 Pomodoros in a row. And then after 2 Pomodoros, you can take a bit of a longer break in the beginning and you can look at your phone or do whatever you like. So after 2 Pomodoros, you'll have worked for 50 minutes, so almost an hour. And trust me, if you stick to that monotasking, you'll be super efficient. Like, you probably won't believe your own eyes. Number 4, take notes when things come up. When you start working in blocks, it will inevitably happen to you that you will think of tons of other things that you also have to get done, or you will get tons of ideas. And that's really amazing. The only thing you need to observe is that you don't give in to that. I know it's like a really strong urge in the beginning and it's really difficult to even sit through 25 minutes. Totally been there. But what you need to do is you always need to have a sheet of paper next to you or an open Word document where you can take notes of all those things that come up during that time. So don't give in to that urge, just write them down, and during your next break, you can either put them in their respective blocks where they belong. For instance, you have an idea for a new blog post, so put that in a blog post preparation block, or just put them in one of your leisure blocks if it's something fun that you want to do, or if it's something that you have to look up, put that in one of those blocks. Okay, so now I have one last bonus tip for you, and that's the one exception with multitasking. So as I've mentioned before, there's one exception where, in my opinion, multitasking is totally fine and is actually something that can be really beneficial. And that is, number one, if you have to do something that's really boring, but that's only physical and you don't need your brain for that, in that case, you can enhance it, you can make it more fun by adding something that will mentally challenge you or that you enjoy on a mental level. So a prime example for me is chores. I'm not a huge fan of chores, and to be honest, I also don't do them that much because we have a lovely cleaning lady, so she does all of the cleaning. However, there's still things like laundry or loading or unloading the dishwasher or preparing dinner, just like things that come up during the day. So what I do is, during those things that I don't particularly enjoy, I always listen to a podcast or to a YouTube video. So I actually just listen to it, I don't watch the video. So sometimes while I'm cooking I might watch it, but usually I just listen to it. And that way I'm actually looking forward to those chores because I know I finally get to listen to my favorite podcast again. So that's a really fun add-on where you can enhance also like healthy habits that you want to establish but that you're not super fond of getting started with. That's a super good way to make that much more fun and enjoyable. And the second thing, or the second kind of activity where you can use multitasking in a good way, is something that's purely physical, that only needs your physical activity, but where you also have time to also educate yourself. So the other prime example for me is when I'm walking my dog, Baloo. So he's a very active dog, so he needs at least 1.5 hours of walking or of activity per day. So that's a lot of time. And while I love walking him, I also know that this doesn't require any mental energy or any brain power for me at all. So again, I listen to some podcasts, and this way I can educate myself and I really enjoy it. And it's like twice as fun because I love being outside and I love listening to the podcast. So there you have it. Task switching and multitasking are equally bad for your productivity and should be avoided at all costs if you're trying to actually get work done. There's one exception, as I've just mentioned, and that is during your leisure time or for chores or things that you really don't enjoy that much, but that where you still have space for something that only requires mental energy. That way you can perfectly combine a physical and a mental activity. Other than that, stick to monotasking, and the best way to do that is to work in blocks. And during those blocks you use batching, so you batch similar tasks together and only work on those during a set amount of time before you take a break or have a leisure block in your calendar. And the best way to use those batching hours is to use the Pomodoro technique. So you work in chunks of uninterrupted 25 minutes time blocks, so 25 minutes without any interruption or task switching, and then you get a shorter break. So that way you can go from your big blocks to small chunks and just add them on top of each other. And don't forget to download my free Pomodoro Worksheet that will make it super easy for you to track what kind of work you're doing, to track how long it took you, and it's super satisfying to tick off those tasks once they're finally done. If you like this video, hit the like button down below, share it with your friends, and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!